The moon loomed low over the highway, casting an eerie, pale glow that stretched across the empty asphalt as I drove along the desolate road. I was deep into my shift. The steady hum of the truck engine was my constant companion, a familiar sound that lulled me into a semi-trance. I'd just picked up a load from a shady industrial district where even the streetlights seemed to flicker with suspicion. The dispatcher had been vague about the cargo, saying only that it was sensitive, but I shrugged it off. Just another night on the job. The cab of my truck was my sanctuary, an insulated bubble of solitude as I maneuvered through the vast emptiness. Glancing at the clock, I noted it was 2 a.m., with miles left to cover. Fatigue began to weigh on me, so I flipped on the radio, hoping to drown out the silence with anything: music, talk, static, anything. But the radio returned only silence, which set my nerves on edge as I drove deeper into the night. Then suddenly, a loud thud echoed from the trailer. My heart skipped, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Fighting annoying unease, I pulled over onto the shoulder, bringing the truck to a halt, and stepped out to inspect the cargo. Through the narrow window, I could only see shifting shadows, but a sinking feeling twisted in my stomach. Shaking it off as paranoia, I returned to the cab, fired up the engine, and resumed my journey, my thoughts a blur. As dawn crept in, the stretch of highway was deserted, with the world around me barely stirring to life. I was still shaken from the incident when, out of nowhere, a figure appeared ahead, waving for me to stop. I slowed down, rolling down the window to get a closer look. A man stood by the road, disheveled and frantic, explaining that his car had broken down. "Can you give me a ride to the nearest town?" he pleaded, his desperation compelling me to nod. Against my better judgment, I gestured for him to climb in, and he eagerly took the passenger seat. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to break the silence as we merged back onto the highway. "David," he muttered, his voice barely steady. "I was just trying to get home, didn't expect to end up here." The more we talked, the more I noticed how his eyes flitted nervously, casting glances behind us. I tried to shake off the unease, but it gnawed at me. "Where are you coming from?" I asked, aiming to keep the mood light. "A friend's party," he replied, vague and guarded. Things got out of hand, and I lost my ride. Every instinct I had screamed something was off. I considered stopping somewhere for coffee, maybe to ease both our nerves, but just as I was about to make the suggestion, his expression changed. "You know, actually, just let me out here," he said, his hand inching toward the door handle. Confused, I replied, "Wait, what? We can help each other out." Without warning, he lunged forward, pulling a knife from his jacket. "Drive, don't stop, or you'll regret it." Fear shot through me, and I slammed the gas, adrenaline taking over as my mind raced for options. All I could see in the mirror was the dim outline of trees against the blackness of the night. "What do you want?" I asked, hoping to buy time. "Keep driving. I'll let you know when to stop," he hissed, his tone dripping with menace. The tension in the cab was suffocating. My GPS showed no signal. We were isolated, far from anything familiar. My heart pounded as I spotted a secluded dirt path veering off the highway. It was risky, but I was out of options. "All right, I'll turn here," I lied, hoping he'd believe I was staying calm. Gravel crunched under the tires as we entered the narrow, tree-lined trail. Darkness closed in around us, and I allowed a flicker of hope. "Where are we going?" he snapped, panic betraying his voice. "Shortcut," I replied, steering the truck faster down the winding path, pretending confidence. "Stop the truck," he yelled, his grip tightening on the knife, but I already had a plan. Ahead, I saw a small clearing, my chance to escape. I hit the brakes hard, throwing him forward in his seat. As he stumbled, I seized the moment, leaping out and slamming the door behind me. I bolted into the woods, branches slashing my face as I ran, my breath ragged with terror. When I finally slowed, I could still hear his distant shouts, angry and desperate. Ducking behind a thick tree, I waited, heart hammering, until I could no longer hear his voice. After a while, I carefully made my way back to the truck. To my relief, he was nowhere in sight. I climbed back in, locked the doors, and forced my shaky hands to start the engine. Navigating back toward the highway, I noticed a group of men standing along the roadside, their eyes watching me intently. My stomach tightened, instincts flaring. I faced a choice: stop to ask for help or keep going. Dread weighed on me as I decided to keep moving, pressing the accelerator, leaving them behind. Finally reaching a truck stop, I parked under the bright lights, hoping for some peace. Inside, the smell of coffee and grease felt like a strange comfort, though my hands still trembled as I ordered a drink. A man in a nearby booth caught my eye. He was on the phone, speaking in a low voice. "I'll send someone to check it out," he muttered, hanging up. A chill ran down my spine as the reality sank in. I wasn't just another trucker. I'd nearly become part of a dark story on the road. The waitress must have noticed my pale face. "You all right?" she asked, setting the coffee before me. "Yeah, just a rough night," I mumbled, trying to sound casual. The man at the booth gave me a strange look. "You sure? Detours around here can be dangerous." Feeling a need to vent, I confessed, picked up a hitchhiker. Things got ugly. He pulled a knife on me. He blinked, shocked. "You're lucky, man." The last driver with a story like that vanished. My blood ran cold. I finished my coffee quickly, escaping the heavy stares as I stepped back into the lot. My pulse raced as I saw him, the hitchhiker, watching me from the edge of the parking lot, a twisted grin on his face. I jumped into the cab, slammed the doors, and started the engine, racing away from the diner without looking back. The truck's roar drowned out everything but my racing mind. Each shadow, each flickering light, now seemed like a lurking threat. In the early morning hours, I realized the road held more than just cargo. It held shadows, secrets, and sometimes terror. As the miles fell behind, I knew I would never view this journey the same way. The sun had just begun to set, casting a golden glow over the seemingly endless stretch of highway. I'd been driving for hours, my mind wandering in sync with the monotonous hum of the road. As a long-haul truck driver, solitude was no stranger to me. This evening, however, felt different. An unsettling tension hovered in the air, tugging at my instincts. Rounding a bend, I spotted a figure waving urgently. It was a woman, standing by the roadside with a weathered backpack slung over her shoulder. I hesitated. Picking up hitchhikers was always a gamble. But something in her demeanor seemed genuine, almost pleading, and I found myself pulling over. The gravel crunched under the tires as I stopped, and she approached quickly, her relief apparent. "Thank you. I thought no one would stop," she said, voice shaky and eyes wide. Dirt streaked her cheeks, and fatigue was etched into her face. She seemed harmless enough, so I gestured for her to hop in. "Where you headed?" I asked, pulling back onto the road. "Anywhere but here," she replied, her voice tight with desperation. "Just trying to reach the next town. My car broke down, and I've been stuck here for hours." Something in her tone carried an edge, but I shrugged it off. Probably just nerves from being stranded. "Well, I'm heading that way. Won't take too long," I reassured her, focusing back on the empty road ahead. She introduced herself as Lily, and we fell into light conversation. She was a college student on her way home after visiting friends, she said. But the details didn't quite add up. Something about her story felt off, disjointed, like she was holding back. My instincts flared, but I forced myself to stay calm and keep my eyes on the road. The sun had set fully now, the road ahead illuminated only by the truck's headlights. Fatigue weighed on me as I tried to shake the creeping unease. I noticed Lily glancing at me from time to time, her face half lost in shadows. "Got family in the next town?" I asked, trying to break the heavy silence. She nodded with a quick, tense smile. "Yeah, my parents are there. I just need to get back." Her voice was steady, but there was an underlying anxiety I couldn't ignore. I turned my focus back to the road, feeling the cab's atmosphere grow heavier, mine pulling over for a moment. She asked suddenly, her tone urgent, "I just need to stretch." Reluctantly, I pulled onto the shoulder. She jumped out and began pacing along the roadside, stealing glances back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. After a few minutes, she climbed back in, offering a forced smile. "Thanks for that. Needed to clear my head," she said brightly, but I sensed something had shifted. The air was charged, and I couldn't shake a prickling sense of dread. We continued in uneasy silence until she finally broke it, voice soft. "Do you ever get the feeling like someone's watching you?" I felt a chill at her words, forcing myself to laugh it off. "Long hours on the road will do that. Just fatigue, messing with your head." She nodded, but her eyes flickered with fear. I couldn't shake the feeling, either. I kept glancing at the mirrors, half expecting to see something lurking just out of sight. Then, headlights appeared in the distance, a car, following us. Relief surged. We were almost to town, but as we approached a traffic light, the car stayed close. It was a dark sedan, its tinted windows making it impossible to see inside. "Is that car following us?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her face had gone pale. "Maybe they're just headed the same way," she said, though she didn't sound convinced. The light turned green, and I accelerated, but the sedan stayed close, lurking just behind us like a shadow. Panic started to bubble in my chest. "I'm going to take a detour," I said, glancing at her. She nodded, and I took a sharp turn onto a side road. But the sedan turned too, headlights flashing in my mirror. I took a few more turns, hoping to lose them, but they followed each one. A gas station appeared up ahead, and I pulled into the lot, parking near a pump. Maybe they'd pass by. The sedan didn't. It pulled in after us, stopping a few spaces away. I slouched down, gesturing for Lily to do the same, and watched two men step out of the car. They scanned the area, eyes shifting in our direction. "What do we do?" Lily whispered, voice trembling. "Wait, stay quiet," I replied, praying they'd give up and leave. After what felt like hours, the men finally turned and climbed back into their car, pulling away. I let out a long, shaky breath and pulled back onto the road. Relief washed over me, but the sense of unease refused to dissipate. "Who were they?" I asked, casting a sideways glance at Lily. She shook her head, face pale. "I don't know. But I don't want to find out." We drove on in silence, every shadow outside feeling more ominous than the last. Just as I was starting to believe we'd escaped, I noticed headlights in the mirror. My heart dropped. The sedan was back, gaining on us. "Hold on," I muttered, gripping the wheel tightly. I accelerated, the truck thundering down the highway. But the sedan stayed close, headlights blazing. I glanced at Lily, her face tight with fear. "We need to hide," I said, and soon spotted a small diner ahead, its neon lights flickering weakly in the darkness. I veered off the road, pulling into the diner's parking lot and parking behind some cars. The sedan followed, stopping at the edge of the lot. "Stay down," I whispered, watching the men step out again, scanning the area. They seemed to be searching for us, faces tight with barely suppressed anger. "They're going inside," Lily murmured. "What if they—" She didn't need to finish. Once they disappeared into the diner, I restarted the engine and crept out of the parking lot. Just as we pulled onto the highway, I saw them in the diner window, one of them spotting us with a look of rage. I slammed on the gas, the truck roaring as we sped into the night. "Why are they after us?" Lily's voice was tight with panic. "I don't know," I replied, the weight of fear pressing down on me. Up ahead, I spotted an old service road. Swerving onto it, we left the highway and bounced along the bumpy path, the sedan's headlights still blazing behind us. The road was narrow and rough, lined with trees. I could only hope it would lead us somewhere safe. After a while, an old abandoned warehouse appeared in the distance. I swerved off the path, driving toward it and parking behind a row of overgrown bushes. I turned off the engine, and we waited in silence, hoping the sedan wouldn't find us. The men soon reached the edge of the woods, their silhouettes visible under the sedan's headlights. I could see them scanning the area, searching for any sign of us. My heart pounded as we sat in silence, every second dragging on painfully. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they seemed to give up. They climbed back into the car and drove off, their headlights disappearing into the night. As soon as I was sure they were gone, I started the engine again. We drove down the dark road, and I glanced at Lily. In her eyes, I saw a reflection of my own fear and a glimmer of hope. The ordeal was far from over, but for now, we were safe. The endless highway stretched before me, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the heart of the Midwest. The sun was sinking below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The hum of my truck engine, a familiar lullaby, soothed me as I drove, the miles melting away under my tires. I was on my way to a delivery in a small town, a routine trip I had made countless times. I was a long-haul trucker, accustomed to solitude, to the company of the open road and the rhythm of the engine. But tonight, a subtle unease crept into the peaceful rhythm of my journey. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, an instinctual warning that something wasn't quite right. As I cruised along, I noticed a figure standing by the roadside, silhouetted against the fading light, a hitchhiker. It was always a gamble picking up strangers, but something about his weary expression, the desperation in his stance, pulled at my heartstrings. I slowed down, pulling over to the side of the road. "Need a ride?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Yeah, man, I would really appreciate it," he said, a grateful smile spreading across his face as he climbed into the passenger seat. "Name's Jake." "Nice to meet you, Jake," I said, returning the smile. "I'm Mark." Jake was a rough-looking man, with a scruffy beard and dark circles under his eyes, but he seemed harmless enough. As we drove, he filled the silence with stories about his life, a mix of hardship and hope. He spoke of losing his job, his girlfriend leaving him, and his desperate need to get to a nearby town for a fresh start. I listened, offering sympathetic nods and words of encouragement, feeling a pang of compassion for him. But as the miles ticked by, a knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Jake's demeanor shifted. He became increasingly agitated, glancing around nervously as if he was looking for something or someone. I tried to rationalize it, chalking it up to anxiety from his current predicament, but the feeling wouldn't leave me. "Hey, can we stop for a second?" Jake asked, interrupting my thoughts. "I need to stretch my legs." "Sure, there's a rest area up ahead," I said, steering the truck towards the exit. When we pulled into the rest area, I stepped out, feeling the cool night air against my skin. Jake got out and walked away, lighting a cigarette and taking long drags. I leaned against my truck, watching him, a growing sense of unease settling upon me. There was something off about him, a darkness simmering beneath the surface. I checked my phone for messages. A notification from my dispatcher popped up, alerting me to a potential storm heading our way. I grimaced, knowing I needed to get back on the road soon. After a few minutes, Jake returned, flicking his cigarette butt to the ground. "Thanks for the ride, man, I really appreciate it." "Can I give you some gas money?" he asked, reaching into his pocket. "No, don't worry about it," I said, waving his offer away, happy to help. We climbed back into the cab, and I started the engine. As I pulled back onto the highway, my unease intensified. Jake was silent, staring out the window, an unsettling intensity in his eyes. The landscape began to shift. Fields gave way to dense woods, the trees crowding the highway like sentinels. The wind picked up, whistling through the branches, and the air grew colder. The sky darkened, a deep purple punctuated by flashes of lightning. "We should probably find a place to stop before the storm hits," I suggested, glancing at Jake. He nodded absently, but the look in his eyes remained unsettling. Suddenly, without warning, Jake leaned over and grabbed the steering wheel, yanking it hard to the right. "What the hell?" I shouted, struggling to regain control as the truck veered off the road, plunging into the woods. We hit a bump with a jarring impact. The truck crashed through underbrush, a cacophony of crunching branches and tearing metal filling the air. "Stop the truck!" Jake screamed, his voice frenzied. "I can't let you take me back." I fought to regain control, adrenaline surging through my veins. I managed to bring the truck to a halt, the engine roaring, and turned to face Jake. His eyes were wild, his breathing ragged. "Get out!" I yelled, my voice rising in panic. "What the hell are you doing?" "I'm sorry, man. I just can't go back," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "You don't understand. They're after me." Who's after you?" I demanded, my fear mingling with confusion. "The people I owe money to," he shouted, his panic escalating to desperation. "I thought I could get away, but they found me. I didn't mean to scare you, but I couldn't let you take me back to that town." I tried to reason with him, to calm him down. "Look, you need to get out of my truck, and I'll call the police. They can help you." His expression shifted, anger flashing in his eyes. "No, you don't get it. They'll kill me." The storm was brewing overhead, thunder rumbling ominously. The tension in the air was palpable. "Listen, just tell me what's going on." "I can't help you if you don't talk to me." He hesitated, his expression shifting from panic to a darker, more sinister look. "I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I don't have a choice. You have to trust me." Before I could respond, he lunged at me, his hands reaching for my throat. I barely managed to dodge his attack, pushing back against the door. The next few moments were a blur of frantic struggle, adrenaline fueling my desperate fight. "Get off me!" I shouted, pushing him back. He stumbled against the passenger side door, momentarily dazed. I seized the opportunity, flinging the door open and leaping out of the truck. I didn't look back, sprinting into the trees, fear driving me forward. I could hear Jake cursing behind me, his voice echoing through the darkening woods. I ran blindly through the undergrowth, branches whipping against my arms and legs, but I didn't stop. The sound of Jake crashing through the foliage fueled my flight. My lungs burned, but I pushed myself harder, my fear a powerful engine driving me forward. Then I tripped, falling hard against the rough ground. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I scrambled to my feet, glancing back to see Jake emerging from the trees, his face contorted in rage. "Where do you think you're going?" he shouted, his voice thick with madness. I turned and ran again, my heart pounding in my chest. I spotted a narrow path through the woods and darted down it, desperate to find safety. My mind was consumed by fear and confusion. I could hear the sound of a truck engine roaring to life behind me. Jake was back in his truck, and he was coming after me. The sound of tires crunching on dirt grew louder, closer. Panic surged through me. I had to escape. I spotted a faint glow in the distance, the lights of a house. Hope flared in my chest. I ran toward it, towards the silhouette of a small cabin nestled among the trees. The lights inside flickered like a beacon, beckoning me to safety. I reached the cabin and pounded on the door, my voice hoarse with desperation. "Please, open up. Someone's trying to kill me," I yelled. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a weary-looking woman holding a shotgun. "What's going on?" she demanded, her eyes scanning the darkness behind me. "Help, please," I gasped, panting heavily. "There's a man after me." The woman's eyes widened as she glanced over my shoulder, her grip tightening on the gun. "Get inside quickly." I rushed past her into the cabin, feeling a sense of relief as the walls closed around me. She locked the door behind us, her expression hardening. "Where is he?" I glanced out the window, my heart pounding as I saw the headlights of Jake's truck approaching. "He's coming. He's going to find me." The woman's face tightened. "We need to be ready if he gets in here. We have to protect ourselves." I nodded, fear mingling with the sudden realization that I wasn't alone. We moved quickly, gathering in the living room, pushing furniture against the door, preparing for the confrontation that seemed inevitable. The headlights of the truck illuminated the cabin, throwing long, menacing shadows. "He's here," I whispered, my voice trembling. We stood in silence, listening to the engine revving outside. We heard footsteps approaching the cabin, and Jake's angry shouts cut through the night. "Let me in. I just want to talk." The woman aimed the shotgun, her face resolute. "If he tries to break in, I won't hesitate." Jake's voice grew more frantic. "I know you're in there. You can't hide from me." Fear gripped me. I didn't know what lengths he would go to. Suddenly, there was a loud bang against the door, the sound echoing through the cabin. My heart pounded. I was terrified. "Stay back." The woman shouted, her voice unwavering. "I'll call 911 if you don't leave." Jake let out a cruel laugh. "You think they can save you? You don't know what I'm capable of." We exchanged a panicked glance, the weight of fear settling upon us. The banging continued. Just then, a siren wailed in the distance, growing louder, a glimmer of hope. I looked at the woman, who nodded. "Hold tight. Help is on the way," she said, her voice steady. "Jake," I shouted, trying to reason with him. "Just leave. You don't have to do this." There was a moment of silence, then Jake's voice, low and dangerous. "You'll regret this, Mark. You had your chance." I braced myself, knowing the confrontation was inevitable. The siren wailed closer. A few moments later, there was a knock on the door, followed by a voice calling out, "This is the police. We've received reports of a disturbance." "Thank God," I breathed, relief washing over me. "Open the door. We need to check on you." The woman nodded, still holding the shotgun. "On my count, I'll open the door. If he tries to come in, I'll shoot. 1, 2, 3. She flung the door open. I knew I would never forget burst that into night. The cabin. The hitchhiker who had turned my life upside down. One of them had gripped me. Jake froze, his eyes darting between the officers and kindness. I didn't do anything. As I climbed back into my truck, his voice was filled with fear. The endless road stretched before me. The officers moved quickly, a reminder of the countless journeys yet to come. Cuffing his hands behind his back. The truck was my sanctuary. I stood trembling in the corner, but I was still shaken by the lessons I had learned that night. One of the officers asked, dangerous, concern etched on his face, and even terrifying. "I think so." I would be more cautious, still in more vigilant, always trusting my gut instincts. Reassurance as the reality. The road ahead was a mystery, but I was ready for it. Whatever the woman lowered her gun, a mix of relief and fear evident on her face. As the officers escorted Jake outside, the weight of the night began to lift. I was alive. I stepped out onto the porch, watching as the officers led Jake away. The storm clouds were parting, revealing the stars. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the past few hours.